Hello, I'm Allison Fitzhugh, and today I'll be discussing Ralph Ellison's book Invisible Man. It was published in 1952. A couple fun facts and backstory about the book and the author is Ralph Ellison was actually the first African American to win the National Book Award, and so that was a big milestone. Ralph Ellison himself was an African American, and I feel like a lot of his personal experiences directly or indirectly correlate to a lot of the themes in this book or have very similar settings, situations. The book Invisible Man focuses on countless themes that are still relevant in our culture today. But Ralph Ellison really focuses on the invisibility of African Americans within the time period he was alive. So some major themes I want to discuss throughout the book, which I will get into in just a moment, are basically his identity crisis. The narrator has crazy problems figuring out who he is and what he wants out of life, and he constantly is running to someone else or something else to try to tell him what or who he is or what he will become. Racial tensions and bias and discrimination are obviously a huge issue throughout this book, and I still think they are very, very present in today's culture, and we will touch on that even more. And then social issues that go beyond racism, and last but not least is another significant event in the book is the Brotherhood kind of telling him how to respond to these situations, I suppose you could put it that way. Another thing I just want to kind of touch on the book is the techniques the author uses all throughout the books. There's so many parallels and like connections in the book from beginning to end. Like he'll reference a color, a location, and you'll see it 3, 5, 6, 7 chapters later, and it will still have this connecting thing. So just writing technique, I'm just kind of like pointing that out all throughout the book. There are parallels and connections, so you never feel like you're lost from like how did we get from here to here. Ralph Ellison really did a good job of connecting metaphors, points, and every single name, location in the book has a deeper meaning into the story. And when you focus on these, the depth of the story, it all connects here. It's amazing writing, unbelievable. So what we're really focusing on in this presentation is how some of the themes throughout this book are still relevant in our culture, society, today, at present, why this book still matters, why it's still relevant. The first one I'm going to talk about is identity crisis, which all throughout the book, obviously the Invisible Man, the narrator, does not even have a name. He feels like nobody cares about what his name is. And from chapter 1, he basically says, my whole life, nobody's noticed me, nobody cares or anything. So as we progress throughout the book, this is a common theme. It's always, and no matter where he goes, nobody really cares about who he is or what he is. They care more so about what he can do for them. So I think that's still relevant today because so many people do look to organizations, to their job, to their significant other, to anything else in life to kind of tell them who or what they are, and they don't take the time, or maybe they don't take the time, they don't know how to figure it out on their own. So they think that somebody else or some event or this is just, if I only do this or cross this off, I will know why or what or who I am. So I think that's still relevant today, and I think the way he presents it in the book might not be everybody's situation, but I think it is still that whole theme in general is very relevant. The next major theme I want to talk about is racial tensions in our present culture. There is so much division, and especially in the time period of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man book, but even more so today, I feel like that is a topic more prevalent than ever. We still have horrible events like we just recently saw the rise of the KKK in Charleston, and that kind of relates to some of the hangings in the book, and horrible discrimination, horrible organizations, and just the lack of response on the side of the racial majority is unbelievable, and it's still obviously, like I said, very present in today's society, which is terribly unfortunate. And another thing I thought was interesting with how he addressed racial discrimination and tension was like from a locational perspective. So he thought when he got to New York, you know, he went from the South where it's so prominent, obviously prominent, but then he moves to Harlem and it's a little bit more discreet, the racism, but it's still something today that you see in our culture. Yes, we just saw this Charleston event. It took place in the South, but we still see horrible situations of racism in the North as well. So that's something that I thought was an interesting fact. Ralph Ellison very briefly highlights on women's discrimination and suffrage in the book, kind of showing that in situations where he is being very marginalized or oppressed, there's a lot of times a woman present in that situation too, or something that has to deal with someone's wife, or at the beginning of the book we saw the stripper who was being objectified and stuff. So that's still very relevant today, even when something as basic as equal pay is still something that we are having to you know, work through. So I thought that was very interesting how he didn't just focus on just the African American aspect of this. He also barely touched on that, but you still definitely see that today. So I think that is still relevant. It still matters now today just as much as it did back then. And the final theme I suppose I want to focus on is elite organizations telling people how to act and respond, or maybe a better way to phrase this is the reaction of elite and privileged in our culture. So something that I didn't initially think about, that I did just think about, we see at the end of the book how an innocent African American man is shot by the police for selling Sambo dolls. And what I thought was very interesting, that is still something that we see so much of, maybe more so in the last 5 years than has ever been publicly brought to everyone's attention, is innocent black men being shot in the street just because, you know, police assumed brutality or something. So I thought that was very interesting, just how the elite or powerful respond to this, how it's still relevant. And I thought that was a very interesting point. Even just how government in general so easily turns a blind eye to these situations without addressing them for what they are. He mentioned that so many times in positions of power throughout the book, like even someone of his own, like Dr. Bledsoe at the university, seeing, you know, what was wrong but still turning a blind eye. So those were the main 4 points I wanted to talk about and how they're still relevant. This book was absolutely fantastic. I could not stop reading it. I'd highly recommend it to anybody, but it's just amazing to see how something written over, I don't know if it's 100 years ago, yeah, over 100 years ago would still be relevant in our present day society. It's almost a bit discouraging to see, you know, where you think you've made progress, but how much have you really made? It was interesting. Love the book. Very interesting topic to write about. Thank you for listening.